Is there anything that comes up for you from that clip from the TED Talk with America Ferrera about identity? Be who you are, I see in the chat. Thank you. The value of authenticity. Okay. Well, I was inspired in a lot of ways with that clip. That's one of the reasons I shared it. But I think it helps us open up the topic around who we are as individuals and how it impacts our life and the privileges that we have and the oppression that we experience. And so today we're going to be talking about identity as individuals, the kinds of things that we relate to, the kinds of ways that we are defined by the world around us, and its relationship to power. And how through time and space that relationship changes. Humanistic psychology, which was founded by Abraham Maslow, who was the father of the universal needs, our universal needs as human beings. I'm sure you guys have seen that pyramid of universal human needs, where at the top, he defines self-actualization as being at the very top, and at the bottom, the physiological needs. And then everything in between that are our social and individual, emotional needs. So this idea of humanistic psychology says that if we can't be our authentic selves, express authentically, be who we are, then we'll never meet that self-actualization. We'll never realize who we are as individuals, and we'll never reach our peak capacity, that flow state, that transcendence, connection with God, or however you want to define it, that whatever's outside of us that creates this beautiful place that we are in, beautiful and frightening all at once. So I'd like to start us out with the practice in small groups where we share with a partner about how we define power. So the exercise is one person will ask the other, what does power mean to you? Would anybody help me demonstrate? Just to asking me, can you pronounce your name for me? Ashutosh, is that right?
Yeah, Ashutosh.
Great. Would you mind either, would you like to ask or would you like to answer?
Anything works for me.
Okay. Well, then I'll ask you just because I'm curious, if that's okay for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so once we get into the partner practice, I would say, Ashutosh, what does power mean to you?
Yeah. So power to me means living in a state where I can be compassionate no matter what is going around me. I have more awareness of my emotions, and I am able to express myself authentically and in an empathic way.
Wonderful. And then what I would do as the questioner is pause, and then I would ask again, Ashutosh, what does power mean to you? And we'll do this exercise for 4 minutes for each person. And as we answer over and over again to that same question, the process is supposed to work as an opportunity to deepen our understanding of what it means to us. So we start to kind of uncover inside of us what it means beyond just the definition. Maybe it means, to me, it could mean fear, the feeling of fear or anger. So I invite you now into small groups. I'm going to open the breakout rooms. You'll be partnered up. If you're not interested in practicing, then that's okay. I would invite you to go practice because that's the fun part of this process. But if you're not up for it, can you just make a note for me that you're not going to go? Either put an equal sign in front of your name or just drop something in the chat quickly. And as we're preparing to go into our practice, I wonder, does anyone have any requests to make of the group as we spend this time together? Any agreements that you'd like to make or requests that you'd like to make of others on how to hold the space together? Okay.
Yeah,
Well, if any,
I have
go
I have
ahead.
one question.
Mm-hmm.
So like how will the time part be managed? Like we have to set it in our clock, or it will be managed by you?
There'll be the practice is 4 minutes for each person. You'll be in the breakout room for 10 minutes, and I'll send a message halfway through. So you have a minute to prepare, and then a minute to kind of touch base after the practice. Quentin, I see your hand.
I was hi. Okay. My name is Quentin. I think it's my second time here. To just give permission for myself to pause, give permission to create my own sense of freeze in my body and to soften my body if I need to, soften my gaze if I need to help create a container opens up to the other person.
Wonderful. So to pause, to kind of take in the space as a way of holding space for the two of you and yourself. Is that right? And the other person.
Yes, and to maybe honor the space around by when I would pause, maybe to just look around my environment to make sure I feel safe and to communicate that I feel safe and sound where I am. But to not well, to more allow myself to feel a sense of movement and not have to sort of freeze myself to receive the other person. Pretty much what you said. Thank you.
Thank you, Quentin. I really appreciate that invitation for the group and for you. Anyone else? How to hold the space together?
Yeah, I'm just joining for the first time, so I'm sorry I'm very late. So, am I missing anything?
We're going to go into partner practice now. You're going to ask your partner, what does power mean to you? Let them answer. Pause for a moment, then ask again. And that's going to last for 4 minutes. And then you'll each have a turn. It'll be 10 minutes in total. Is that clear?
Yes, please.
Wonderful. Anyone else before we move into the breakout rooms? Okay, the rooms are open. I'll send a message halfway through. I'll be out here, so if you need help, there's a little button in the bottom corner of your screen that says ask for help, and I can come in and give you a hand. Welcome back. How was the practice? What did you take away from it? How was that for you to be digging about your definition of power, to see your partner and their definition of power? Did you find that interesting? Would you change it in some way?
Well, for me, Quentin had a lot of ideas about power for him, and I found it quite mm, I'd like to explore it more because it was vast in many ways, and it covered a lot of areas. Yeah.
Thanks, Leon. What else? What else about power came up for you? That Akidi? Is that right? Did I pronounce your name right?
EKD.
Eddie. Welcome.
So thank you very much. It's not that easy. I think the experience was nice, and we were able to reflect on that. And so many words come up when we are reflecting about power. Like we have to think power as someone who has authority above someone, someone who is more superior, someone who is in charge of somebody, right? So these words, run across our conversation. Somebody who has more strength, more influence, against another, and also somebody who has a total control against another. So all these words came around our discussion, and it was really interesting to see how power can mean a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Akide. So as we go into this next step of our practice, how do we define power? That exercise was supposed to help us understand personally how we connect with the idea of power. But now I want to move us into understanding power as a group. So how should we define it? How do we define the idea of power? And if you see in the chat, there's a link. It goes to my website. Underneath of additional resources, there's a document called Identity and Power. You can open that PDF and download it. That'll be what we'll be working with today. And it has 4, 5, 6, 7 pages of materials that we'll be going through. So I invite you to do that. If you have any issues with that, just let me know. So I see in the chat, one definition for power is taking control over somebody's life. How else can we define power? Pamela, I see your hand.
Yes, I'm gonna be vaguely paraphrasing, but isn't Mickey Cashton's definition something like the ability to marshal resources to meet needs or something in that ballpark? So I guess I'm noticing that when I was introduced to her definition, it helped me delineate between the received wisdom of what power means, which has a lot of connotations that aren't necessarily positive or wholesome. But thank you.
Great. Yeah, Mickey Kashtan's definition is the one that I usually reference because it's very broad, and it is specifically the capacity to mobilize resources to attend to needs. And that's individual power. She also has some other definitions for power that involves the structural power, the idea of social structural power, which is also known as privilege. And then there's also relational power. And that's how in relationship, in community, we have power or we don't have power. So all of that is in the handout on the first page under types of power and privilege. So I invite you to just take a look at that. And I wonder, would anyone like me to screen share so that you can see that document? Okay, I'm going to open it up on my computer for just a moment so you can read it. Pamela, I see your hand again. Would you like to share something?
Sorry, I don't think I lowered it.
Okay, cool. All good. I didn't, let's see. Okay. So here we have types of power and privilege. Sorry, it's a little bit easier to read. There we go. So this is the framework that we'll be going through today. We're going to talk about power and privilege. Then we're going to talk about identity. And one way of understanding our identity is through the idea of intersectionality. Then we're going to talk about positionality, which is how our identity is impacted by our power and privilege. And then that in turn is impacted by the systems that we're a part of. And then we're going to talk about up-down power, up power and down power. And then lastly, we're going to talk about our own personal experience with these things, and we'll exercise a little bit together. Quentin, I see your hand.
I don't see it.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for saying so. There we go. Is it clear now?
Yeah, I can see something. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so here we're talking about, these are the 5 steps that we're going to go through today, just kind of an overview. We've got another hour and 20 minutes together. And then here are the types of power and privilege that as defined by Mickey Kashtan. And I wonder, just using the simple definition of power to get us started, the capacity to mobilize resources to attend to needs. I wonder if anyone has anything to add or anyone has anything they want us to consider in addition to that as we move into understanding types of power within that definition. Okay. I'm going to stop the share now and bring us back to the group. Wonderful. Okay, so what kinds of power, what types of power show up in our lives? How do you see power in your life? This is where we learn from each other. I would love to hear voices besides my own.
Yeah, so it's I think it starts with parents, and then in school system, like teachers have more power over students, and also parents have initially have more power over children. I think that's how it starts in the family thing.
Great. I love that consideration to keep in mind. Where does power begin in our lives as human beings? Typically in the home. And how does that impact us? You know, learning how power is navigated and used in our home from our parents, our role models, our caretakers. How does that influence how we show up with respect to power the rest of our lives? Thank you. What else? What other considerations around power?
Excuse me. Oh, good. Oh, that was me. What I was going to say, it's okay to have the camera off, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to show up as you'd like.
Based on what you just said, partially that came, if a well reminder, the sense of feeling anxious with power, avoiding power, and also having a secure relationship with power, and how those things can permeate collective groups or individual situations or relationally. The feeling of being able to work with something that builds tension in the body and hold space with someone and then allow each person to release that and while being seen. Ooh, I mean, that's an exchange that. Um, and then go through the experiences of being honest about your past or my past, about how I have a difficult time holding power, that I feel jealous when I perceive other people have more security with their power. And that I just don't want to, I want to avoid the whole thing because I don't want to I don't want to be blamed. I don't want to be blamed for harming myself or harming someone else. Those are often things that I think people don't discuss when power enters the room. They give up maybe and let that person who seems to want to shine or that person who says something, give it to them so they can take the rap. You know? So there, I think it permeates relationships too, like romantic relationships. And yeah, but I love the idea when you said, you know, the power that sort of happens with a group, you know, as a community, how we can use that.
I didn't catch that last bit, Quentin. The power we have as a group, how we can
How we can use that, you know,
use that.
yeah, how we can use that to, for me, I mean, I'll just say this because I'll, you know, step back for a while, is the sense that the power is a tool that can really help people thrive within a collective. And I am inspired by peace. So, you know, the sense that there's a sense of peace and thriving and serenity and thriving, and how a group of people can encourage each other to do that. I know my partner who I was with really encouraged me by being himself or or herself to sort of touch into that, what we can do together.
What I'm hearing is this need for authenticity, but also vulnerability and a balance in those things. And also the, like, for me, the essential component for those things to be possible is this need for trust, to be able to trust your environment, to feel safe, to feel secure with the other person, with the other people, that you can be vulnerable and express these insecurities and them not be used against you and not be threatened. Yeah.
But also, and also for people, Leanne, to make mistakes, to be able to make mistakes, have a sense of humor, have almost a richness of the mistake, and how we can use that together to continue to build and move forward and expand.
Great. So acceptance and forgiveness and the ability to be ourselves and not be right, be wrong sometimes, and be graceful in that with the support of the community, of the people around you, for them like accepting that and holding you in that vulnerability and saying it's okay. We're gonna be fine. We just got to learn a little bit more about each other and how to do this together. Oh, I love that. That's so touching for me. Beautiful. Anything else that comes up from this conversation? I see in the chat being free from the opinions of others, considering how labels define power. What else? Okay. Well, I want to take our attention back to the document that was shared and just go over kind of this framework or these ideas of power, of ways of defining it, just to help us find a common definition to work with today. So we have a variety of different kinds of power. Kitty, I see your hand.
Can't access the document. Can I download it, or I can't see it? I'm trying to.
Yes. If you go,
If I open it up, then I won't see my screen. I won't join in the. So I'm just wondering how I can put it side by side or something like that. Or can I download it? How would I download it, please?
Yeah, if you go to this link that's in here, actually, I'll just add it to the chat so that it's easy to download. I like to send people to my website so you can see all the stuff I'm working on.
Yeah, I'm seeing it at the website, but I can't download it. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
Sorry.
That's okay. Pranav, I see your hand, please.
I just wanted to add to our discussion. One of the things that came up in our breakout session was limitations to power, the inefficiencies, corruption, and individual inefficiencies. So, the kind of power that we are talking about, which is situated and in individuals, in groups, but has this locus somewhere, I think that it is fundamentally limited, and the way we transform those limitations, the way we transcend those limitations, but also find ourselves limited in our power, that it matters. And I would love to think about that as we move on, about growth, but also, I mean, transcending our limitations is also another power. So, yeah.
Wonderful. And we're going in that direction by trying to understand our identity and then the power that we have, then working towards like collective empowerment and then empowering ourselves. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I really appreciate that contribution. Anna, I see your hand.
Yes, I also want to add something to this discussion, and it is what I was thinking about in the last session also. What does the feelings mean to me when I feel something, and is it always safe for me to talk about the feelings? If I want to share my feelings with everybody and I'm not sure if I can do it. Thank you. That's all.
I love the question, and I want to ask the group. When we have emotions that arise, is it always, safe for us to be vulnerable and express? Especially if we're talking about in situations where there's an imbalance in power. What do you think?
Definitely not. And I think part of managing one's own personal power effectively is being able to discern when it's safe and or strategic to say things. And if not, like what else can be done? And that's a thing I really struggle with. I'm just constantly like wanting to say what I think and often doing it. And that doesn't go over well with people who have power and are insecure about it.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you for your vulnerability. Can I get a show of hands of anybody who can relate to that experience? Yeah, me too. So when we're vulnerable and expressing emotions, it could be that we're punished for that. If that emotion isn't something the others or othered wants to receive. And that's the kind of world we live in a lot of the times, I find. And I see this note in the chat about how important courage is. One of the things that I've found recently from my courage and my yearning to be authentic and my dysregulation in my emotions is that I break a lot of relationships. But with the wisdom that I've gained from the years I've been here in breaking relationships, I'm starting to realize that maybe it wasn't aligned for me to be in that relationship. Maybe that relationship really wasn't serving me, or maybe if they're not willing to see all the parts of me, maybe it's stopping me from being my authentic full self by being in that relationship, because I have to hide parts of me when I'm, not to say that I don't have some things to work on, right? Like, not to say that I can't like maybe better manage my experience and my emotions and how I'm expressing to support the relationships that I have and the people around me, because I care for them too. But going to back to what Quentin said about, like, we make mistakes as human beings. And is there space for that mistake in the relationship? Because if there's not, if I can't go back and say, I'm so sorry, I blew up on you, or, you know, like, I didn't mean to say that, or can you imagine how upset I was, but I really love you, so can we work on it? If there's not room for like to hold that, then maybe that relationship isn't one that's really supporting me and all of me. And I see your hand.
Yes, I was thinking about this, and I have an idea or the thought that it is really honest to say to someone, I want to communicate with you in the way using nonviolence communication. And it will be clear then that I want to talk about the feelings and needs with the other person, not only about stuff, what's happened, and only, not on this level, but on the deeper level. But I also write that someone need to be conscious their feelings or her feelings, and it is work to do, and it is not so easy just like this that it happened one day, I think. Thank you very much. That's all.
Yeah, I also yearn for relationships that are deep and allow me to be vulnerable, where I can trust that I'll be held with care. I think that's one of the reasons why I do this. Try to support cultivating those kinds of spaces, because it's so dear to me. I'd like to shift us back into the definition of power, just to get a little bit more detail around the definition, unless anyone else has anything else they'd like to share right now in this moment. Pranav, I see your hand.
Yeah, it's just what you shared reminded me a lot of So Roxanne Anning has this notion of accountable space, whereas in contrast with safe space. So ensuring safety is quite a task, and accountable space aims at noticing and caring and healing from whenever harm was caused. So harm seems to be inevitable, and the ability to go back and account for that, having space for that it really reminded me of that.
Thank you. Yeah, accountability is important because that's where the healing begins, in my opinion. We can forgive, but the trust oftentimes is really hard to rebuild. But if we can take ownership and responsibility and accountability to our parts in the disruption of the relationship, I think that's where we can start to rebuild the relationship. Okay. So I want to shift our attention now to the top of page 4 in the handout, where we've got these different types of power. I'm going to let you take a look at 3 on your own with more detail, but I just want to give a brief overview of how we go from our personal power, which everybody has as individuals, right? We each individually have personal power, whether that's in our home or in our workplace or in the choices that we make every day. We have the power to meet needs in our life, of our own, in almost every moment of every day, right? I don't think any one of us can say that we don't have power in some way in our lives all the time. And that's, again, going back to the definition, the ability to what's the word? The ability to meet our needs, the capacity to mobilize resources to meet our needs. And so we go from this place of having our personal power into interpersonal power, which is the roles and statuses we have in the world that we live in, whether that's because of our education or because of our title or because of the relationship we have with our neighbor, all these different ways, these labels that we use in the world that we live in to define us, right? So we have our interpersonal power, and that even could be just from like historical context of the relationship, right? Like I may have power in one relationship because of the experiences the other people have had with me until that point, right? They may see me, for example, like many of you come to my sessions and maybe you see me having more power in certain ways because you've seen me facilitate and you know the way I hold space and the way that I try to show up. And so maybe you look up to me in some way, and that is a way of dedicating power to another person. And then I can also internalize that, right? I can say I have more power in this space than other people. One reason is I've got the host button, right? Like I can end this meeting at any moment. And that gives me power amongst the group, right? So then we've got the personal, we've got the interpersonal, and then we've got the collective power. And the collective power is where we can motivate needs or motivate resources to meet our needs collectively, as a group. And this is kind of where I tend to go when I'm wanting to see change in the systems that I'm a part of. And that could be as simple as, you know what? Anna says to me, hey, Leanne, I think it would be better if we all became hosts to make it feel more like we are together in this space as equals. And maybe Leon says, yeah, I agree with that. And then somebody else raises their hand and say, yeah, I think that's a great idea too. And so that is individuals using their personal power and interpersonal power to move to the collective realm and then change the system that we're a part of here together in this group. And so that's just one simple example of mobilizing our resources collectively to try to change the system that we're a part of together. And now I'm going to move to the second figure on page 4. And this is comparing dominant use of power versus the right use of power. And so I'd like to read through this together. And I would invite people to read the choices under the right use of power. So I'll read the dominant forms of power. So in a dominant system, power is something only people have. Excuse me. Power is something only some people have, not everyone. What happens when it's a right use of power? Everyone has some power, no one is powerless. So just a little caveat, we always have personal power to some degree to motivate our resources to meet our needs. Almost always, like even if it's just the need for like empathy and sympathy to self-empathize with ourselves, right? You could say someone who was imprisoned and not given any freedoms would still have some power in that situation over themselves, right? It wouldn't be very much, but it would be a little bit. So just like that caveat, there is always personal power to some degree. So when power is a commodity in a dominant system, when it's the right use of power, it's dynamic in every relationship, which means that it's changing, shifting. When power is static in a dominant system, if we were to look at it with respect to a right use of power, again, it changes in every relationship. So it's not something that is scarce, and it's not stuck where only certain individuals have power, right? Power is changing from one individual to another, and it's abundant. And in a dominant system, power over is how power works. If we're looking at the right use of power, power would be fundamentally neutral. Power with others is possible. So not one person or a group of people is dominating over others. People have choice in the decisions that are being made for the group. And then lastly, in a dominant system, power is a singular thing. But in a system where power is being used in a way that supports everyone, power is complex, nuanced, and has many types. So this idea of right use of power is not saying right or wrong, but rather this is a definition of a type of power, the right use of power. And ultimately what the right use of power asks is that, people have freedom to choose and choice over their bodies, over what's happening with them. They have the ability to make decisions for themselves. Does anyone have any questions about that figure? Okay. So now I want to
sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
so
please.
yeah, the dominant aspect is can we say it's good or universal or acceptable?
What do you think?
I have some some objections, like sometimes it sounds coercive, right? It's not the will of the people, thriving in that kind of power paradigm. So I'm just curious if you can explain it more.
Sure. Well, for me, I really enjoy trying to transform systems of power that are dominant into ones that are more balanced and harmonious and equal, where we have choice over our bodies and the system, we have choice in the systems that we're a part of. That's my personal preference, and that's one of the reasons why I hold these sessions on social change, because I really want to move out of oppressive, dominating systems into ones
Mhm.
that are empowering us and
Yeah.
allowing, you know, fostering and facilitating and cultivating choice.
And
Pranav. Svetlana, I see. Oh, great. Okay. Pranav, I see your hand, and Svetlana, you're next.
I noticed that the point about power being static, and I'm familiar with this dynamic of, race for power and, reaching out for power in dominant systems. So there's a competition in dominant systems, which is not a dynamic that would probably be there in shared use of power with people. I wonder if you could discuss that dynamic, or is it something different, or is it relevant?
Yeah, well, ultimately, when we get into this next section on intersectionality, we're going to talk about our identities. And as someone with multiple identities, as we all are, we all have different, we all can relate to different types of identification with ourselves and the world around us. With those different identities, our power shifts depending on the systems that we're a part of, from moment to moment through space and time. So if I'm in a room full of people like this, the power that I have here is going to be different than if I go down to the hardware store and I'm in a room full of people at the hardware store. And then when I go to the library, the power that I have that in that space is going to be different as well. If I go down to the city hall, the power that I have in that space is going to be different as well. And so depending on the people that are around me and the systems that I'm a part of, that power is always changing. In a dominant system or a dominant power structure, those individuals that hold the power are the ones that hold the power all of the time. And no matter who you are and who you're relating to and the groups of people you're around, it doesn't matter. Does that make sense?
It does make sense that they are very difficult to change and shift. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
I would like.
all right, go ahead.
Yes. So the dynamic I was referring to was that of gaining power, or gaining power over, and
Yeah.
or even systemic shifts. They do happen, and yeah, I was just curious in what sense is it static, and I got some clarity on that. That from an individual's perspective and from a first person perspective, yes, a lot of power structures are static. Yeah.
Absolutely. But also, you know, if we go to the social, if we go to the role and status interpersonal level of power, that is also very static. If someone has a PhD, they're going to be the person with more power than someone who has, you know, no graduate level or undergraduate education. So the static, and that's a byproduct of a dominant culture. Because the dominant culture has said that the PhD has more power, more value in society, in the culture. And so we should give them more power in that society. They should have more ability to make, you know, their choice, their opinion is more powerful. They may have more choice. with respect to the jobs that are available to them, with respect to the opportunities to speak even. And so and even at the collective level within the system, we find that certain groups are chosen over others. Their opinions are chosen over others. They're given more opportunity than others. I mean, if we look at in India, I know this is the caste system is not prevalent now, but I know it's still present. If we look here in the United States, redlining is just something that was just recently changed. You know, it's only been about 50, 70 years since it's been, not even, it's the 70s, it's about 50 years. When those laws changed, where people were literally, you know, chosen for loans based on the way that they looked, their skin color, had nothing to do with their income. And then in that it in and of itself, right? Wealth is the number one defining factor in hierarchical dominating systems for who gets choice and who doesn't. Svetlana, I see your hand.
Yeah, I have a question. You said that we should give them more power if it's about PhD, and if there is no, the person maybe doesn't have this PhD. So it's like there is no possibility to change somehow, and why we should give some people power if it's like how, like training. Okay, we try to give, to play, and then to see what will happen, and then I don't know, because if a person feel wants this power, can after feel in the same position, like it like in the same feelings like it has before, when take away this power from this person. Or it's something that inside, then why people, for example me, afraid of say something in front of a lot of people?
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I know that we as individuals choose where to put our power, and then the society, like the collective and the systems that we're a part of, also choose where to put power, right? So I myself as an individual, my personal level, may look at someone who has a PhD and give them more of my attention, more of my trust. You know, those are different ways of me dedicating power to that individual. But then the system we're a part of also dedicates more opportunity to that individual. And whether or not it's, I'm having a hard time following your question, Svetlana, and I really appreciate you asking it because I know how challenging it can be. And for example, you know, language is one form of power, communication, right? So like all of us speaking, we're all sitting here speaking language. The language that we're sharing is English. English is my first language. It's something I've learned since I was born. You know, so I have more power in this communication than you do. because we're using the language that I was raised on and not the language that you were raised on. Does that make sense?
With language, it's easier, but I don't think that it's the same power as I don't know. I mean, maybe physical. It's we cannot equal physical and mental power. I think like for
Yeah.
physical should be physical community, for mental should be like that. But if it in one thing, it's how to compare, I don't know.
Well, it's for me, it's about, again, it goes back to being able to meet our needs and how we motivate our resources. And so if I have the ability, because I have the resource of a really extensive vocabulary, and because I've been learning and practicing English since I was a baby and I speak it every single day, it's much easier for me to motivate my resources to speak English and communicate in this group than it may be for others, which gives me an advantage. And so if we're always using English as the language to communicate in these spaces, anybody who doesn't feel comfortable speaking English, anybody who doesn't speak English, they don't have access to that resource of being in the space together with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, for me, it's not about right or wrong, good or bad, even though I'm completely against domination and oppression, right? It's more about, okay, let's be aware. And that's what the practice is. We've got about 45 minutes left, and we're going to go through talking about these identities and how we can motivate and mobilize ourselves with the connection to the identities that we have to try to change the systems that we're in, whether it's collectively or individually, so that it'll start to embrace the different identities that we carry and not just parts of us. So let's move on into the next section, which is about intersectionality and identity. So we're on page 5 now. And I just want to take our attention to this idea of intersectionality, which you can take away from looking at the bottom of the page 5 in the handout. And this idea or this theory was developed by Kimberly Crenshaw, Professor Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. And ultimately what intersectionality does is it helps us identify the different labels that we have, the different ways that we can define ourselves and that we can define others, and allows us to evaluate, our experience and all of the parts of us, others' experiences and all of the parts of them, to try to get a more holistic view of how not only we interact with the world around us and the systems we're a part of, but with each other. And so as you can see from the figure on the left side of the bottom of page 5, we've got things like race, ethnicity, gender identity, class, language, religion, ability, sexuality, mental health, age, education, body size, wealth, right? And so many more ways of defining us as individuals. And then if we relate that to how power in the systems that we're a part of is obtained, we can see that depending on where we fit in each of those categories, we could have more or less power. So for example, when we're talking about housing as being one of the classes of intersectionality, a homeless person has a lot less power in the world that we live in than someone who owns their property. If we're talking about gender, a cisgendered man is oftentimes with more power in the worlds that we live in. Of course, this varies from system to system, but in most systems, I would say, they have more power than most other people. With wealth, I would say in almost every system that we're a part of, the richer you are, the more power you have. The more you can mobilize resources to be able to meet your needs. So I'd like to take a few minutes now and invite you all just to reflect on what kinds of categories or classes you can define for yourself, where you fall in the ones that are listed here. Are there others that really are pronounced from your experience that influence or impact your access to power? So I'd like to invite you to choose 2 or 3 of these different categories. State where you fall within the spectrum of power, less power and more power. So for example, with me, I would say at this point in time, I'm lower middle class. I'm renting my property. But this is in the structure of, or the system of, the country that I live in. So I'm looking at it with the system or structure as the United States. If you compare my situation to another country's, I may actually be one of, a more wealthy person. I may even be greater than middle class in some places because of the resources that I have to be able to mobilize the housing situation that I'm experiencing. With respect to, race or gender, again, I'm probably more powerful. Even though I do find that being a female body individual can be really challenging for me in certain systems and structures that I'm a part of. So how do you and the labels that you identify with, the characteristics that we define as, the way that we organize our society, how does your experience, your lived experience, relate to power or your ability to motivate and mobilize resources to meet your needs? So now shifting to positionality, we're going to take the 2 ideas of power and identity, or intersectionality is one way of looking at our identity, and try to understand how they relate. So for example, my social identities, gender, race, class, and other aspects of me influence and inform how I can move through the world. What access I have to opportunities, to knowledge, what biases I experience, whether externally or the biases I carry with me from the experiences that I've had. And then the filters, right? The way that I observe the world because of the experiences that I have living in this body with the things that I have that I use to mobilize my resources to meet my needs. And then there's like unconscious bias, right? There are things that we don't even have an awareness of that impact the way that we see the world. And a lot of times that comes from the identity that we have and the experiences that shape us in that identity. So, for example, I'm going to pick on the male body here for a moment. Please don't take offense. The male, you know, a white male homosexual may not see the privileges that he has because he recognizes his homosexuality as being something that really burdens his ability to interact with power in the world that he lives in. But in reality, in the many different systems that we live in, him being white and male actually puts him in a position of being able to access and have the opportunity to access a lot more power than many other kinds of people. And so the idea of having power and then the idea of the different identities that allow us to access power is a concept that I want us to think about as like yes and. So yes and I have this identity, yes and I also have this identity, yes and I also have this identity. And so it's not either or, but rather we're trying to build based on the different identities that we carry with us, how we're interacting with the power that's around us. And then in turn, this is the key for me and this exercise, the reason that we're here, the way that we can use this for social change is how do we connect with people that have identities that can they can either relate to our identity or we share different identities. How do we mobilize like collective action amongst us? And then also, how do we get them to see, because we have relational identities, how do we get them to see other parts of us that they may not be able to relate to? And I think this goes back to what we talked about earlier, that this idea of being able to be vulnerable, being able to build trust, being able to use the identities that we have that allow us to have more access to resources and support others who may not have as much access to those resources as we do in certain systems. So now shifting our attention to this idea of up power and down power. Someone with up power in a certain system has increased responsibility, authority, potential for more control over decisions and outcomes. And how can I use that up power in this space to empower others here? To be vulnerable, to express themselves, to feel like they have choice. The perception of down power could be that I feel more vulnerable. Sorry, the perceptions of up power could be that I may be seen to have more power, more influence, and more leverage, right? You guys could see that I have more power in this situation, and that might actually be something that constrains you. from being able to express or try to achieve more power. Just the thought of someone having power over you. But if I take on the responsibility of recognizing and realizing that I have more power in this situation, and I take on the responsibility of trying to empower others in the system that I'm in, then maybe that brings you opportunity to gain more power. So I wonder if anyone can relate to that, where they have more power. Anna, I see your hand.
Yes, can I said or add something to this, what I was telling, because someone maybe misunderstood me. Because when I'm talking about my feelings, or sorry, maybe for my English, it's not the best, isn't, but I try my best. So, yes, thank you, thank you. And I want to add to this that I sometimes talk about the feelings what I have because I'm thinking what the feelings I have in particular situation, you know, for example, in my work. So I'm not only telling from the state when I'm angry, and I'm not talking that I am angry in this situation, but I'm talking about my feelings. And someone cannot understand me, or I don't care what you feel in this situation or something like this, you know, because the people communicate, I think, this in outside or external things, you know, and not thinking about this. So when I'm talking with my friend and I'm hearing that someone going from the difficult situation and not talking about the feelings, so then I don't know what are the needs of this person, and even I try to care about this person, I don't know how to do it because I can't live beside this person, you know. And for me it is good to be honest in the way that someone cannot be conscious, because if I not tell about it that I communicate in nonviolence communication in this language, so this person is not conscious that I'm talking in this language. And I think that it is good opportunity to set loud and to the outside world that I use nonviolence communication, and it is really good and can help me to feel better, or you know, to accomplish my needs and all of this. So it is not that I won't force someone to talk about their feelings or her feelings, you know, and but I think it is better, it is easier, you know, to think what I feel in the situation, in some situation, you know, not talking that my boss will behave like this and like this. Okay, he can behave like this or or like that. I don't know why he behaved like this, but what you feel in this situation and what are the needs in this situation, it is more important to focus on me. So like I see this slides or this PDF you give, so I see that it is focused on outside and inside, like the power can be outside or inside. And I have no power on the outside things, what the system gives me, because I was writing here that someone create external system or external world for a purpose. So they also have some needs to create the world like this or like that. And my responsibility or my responsible is only when I focus on what I want, what I feel, what are my needs, you know, and only focus on me, how to achieve them, and not using violence. So the only way is to tell about my feelings. Even I think it is strange for some people, because I don't have a lot of people who communicate in this way, you know, telling about the feelings. So I see that it is a lot of things to do in this system, but when I'm not telling about it and I see that I don't tell a lot about this, so people don't know what I'm doing and that I'm talking about things. Okay, you can, but you are a strange person, or maybe, you know, they can think about me like, I don't know why you're telling me what you feel. You know,
Well, I
it is
think
so, it is important, I think, to say about it, but not force that you need to also talk about the feelings. But
thanks, Anna.
it
Yeah.
is tell them that's all. Someone can also do the same, but I can't force everyone or anyone to communicate in this way. That's all. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. So one of the things, actually, I see the use of nonviolent communication as a way of mobilizing resources to meet my needs, right? So it's actually quite a powerful tool. And if we're going to just talk about that for a moment, there's nothing in nonviolent communication that says that we have to go into communication with the other person and that they have to tell us what their feelings and needs are. What it does teach us is to understand what's going on inside of us. And also, we can postulate by empathizing with the other person, we can consider what they may be experiencing to build empathy for them and their experience. And so through that process of, okay, I'm going to do the internal work. I'm going to understand what's going on inside of me. I'm going to recognize the emotions that are coming up for me. I'm going to recognize the needs that are behind it. So I can see, okay, I'm in this relationship with this person and I have these needs and we're meeting those needs together, but there's something that's happening here that's causing some conflict, or maybe not. Maybe this relationship is so rich and full and I wonder why it's so beautiful. I'm trying to understand what needs is meeting. But either way, I'm in collaboration with someone else in some situations where we're meeting our needs together. And instead of saying, I need to go talk to them to find out what their needs are, I can understand from an empathetic perspective what may be going on for them. And then I can shape the way that I'm interacting in that relationship to recognize that they may have needs that they're not able to meet or that they're yearning to meet. I can recognize that I have needs that I'm yearning to meet that aren't being met there, and I can resource myself in a different way to meet those needs. And then I become less attached to that relationship and that other person meeting my needs. And so these are all different strategies that we use to help to meet our needs, right? And I find NVC, nonviolent communication, as this powerful tool of understanding, what are my needs? What needs am I meeting? What needs am I yearning for? How can I meet my needs better? And then resource myself to meet those needs in different ways, depending on those systems that we're a part of, right? How we're interacting with those different systems. One system might help me meet my needs really well. One system might not be meeting my needs at all, you know, in one or two needs, but many of them aren't being met. So how do I shift my energy to a different system? And that's actually one of the major ways I find that we can transform or change systems is, one is collective action, helping other people recognize the needs that they are not meeting, and then mobilizing them together, us together, to meet our needs together. And another way is recognize the relationships that are sabotaging us being able to meet our needs and no longer resourcing those relationships, no longer putting energy into those relationships, taking my power away from those relationships that are not serving me, that are actually hurting me. And so, for example, one of the ways I do that is through the way I spend my money. I don't put my money into systems that I don't believe in. I try not to use like big corporations, generally speaking, because I know that they're not, most of the time they're degrading the environment. Most of the time they're not taking care of the people that work for them, right? So I know that's one way that I can mobilize my resources as an individual. And I do that through a deep understanding of the relationships I have with the world around me, the systems that I'm a part of, the people in my life, and how those relationships, those systems are meeting my needs. And then how do we mobilize other people using NVC? It's the exact same thing, except we work together. We say, I'm not going to let this corporation, this government, this industry stop me from being able to meet my needs anymore. I'm going to mobilize my energy. I'm going to mobilize the people around me. And one way to connect with people around us, to build trust, to support vulnerability, to help to cultivate this inquiry, is by looking at the different labels that we have and how we can build bridges with the people around us, these different intersectionalities, these different identities. I'm much more likely to be open and exposed to a bunch of female-bodied individuals when I'm talking really vulnerably, right? So how can I get into groups where I can identify with people that have the characteristics that help me be vulnerable, to work together to support each other? And then kind of going back to a point that was made earlier, the more I become comfortable with being vulnerable, and the more I am capable of meeting my needs in a variety of different ways, the more secure I feel to be able to go into any relationship, be vulnerable. And if that relationship doesn't serve me, move on to the next one. Find the alignments, know where we can work together to support each other in a way that allows me to be authentic, where my whole self, and then that's the flow state, that's the creative state, that's the transcendence, where I'm like elevating myself. Svetlana, I see your hand.
Yeah, I want to ask this. If another person that I talk to, and this person usually lie. So even if I invest my time, energy, the person lie. So it's, as you just said, I should take my energy from that and choose something else. But what the need of that person, and even if I try to ask to get more concretity, the person just lie. So how to behave? What's the need? Maybe there are a lot of this person has a lot of fear, or maybe it's usual thing. It's a level of survival. So if so can be this person have this experience when telling truth, something bad happened, and when telling lie, everything is okay. So how can I communicate that?
So what are the needs underneath of that behavior that you're yearning to meet in that relationship, Svetlana?
I have two situations. It's just usual thing. It's like to buy something in a market, in this one person, and another thing, it's so I need a guarantee in this case of quality, and in another case, it's like more private thing. So Mm,
I hear trust is something that you're yearning for in that relationship with the person from the market. Is that right?
yes, but a lot of time there wasn't trust. So what to do? So there is no opportunity, resources inside to give. But maybe I don't see something.
Well, I wonder if, so the, the question is a little bit off topic. I wonder if we can use this up power and down power example to relate to what you're expressing.
Maybe. Mhm.
Yeah, I see that you're both with power in the situation, right? Because you have the money to buy and they have a product that you're interested in. Is that right?
Mhm.
And so you're trying to build trust and you both have power in the relationship. And I wonder, are there any identities that you can relate to with this person?
Identity, the same with this person.
Any things that you would relate, like, for example, is it a female or is it someone who's
Female, yes, female.
yeah. So I wonder, is there a way of using the shared identity as a bridge to connect with this individual? Talking vulnerably, expressing your needs, trying to understand the needs that they have. I understand that, like, for example, you could talk to them, you know, value and quality of products is really important to me. Like, I wonder if you can understand how, you know, me spending my money at this stall is something that would support you, but I need to ensure that the products that I'm buying are going to be of good quality. Because
Okay, so maybe it's another identity. It's like a product for, sorry for this, maybe for somebody it's stupid, but it's a product for my cat. So it's like not for me, but I know that after the cat just will not eat it. So I lose money like that. So the person do not understand that it's not for me, but like it doesn't matter about cat. But it's similar to up and down topic.
well, the details aside, more importantly, going back to the up power, down power, the idea is how do we mobilize, how do we empower the others around us that are down power in the systems where we have power, right? So by you buying their product, you're actually helping them mobilize their resources to meet their needs. Is that right? I think so. And so this is a way of empowering them. But trust is really important to you. And so the way you could use your power would be to mobilize vendors who are selling a product that is the quality that you need if you want to see more of that in the market, right? You take the power of the money and you put it towards something that would be in alignment with the values that you have around this product. Quentin, I see your hand.
This is not in particular. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, this is not necessarily in particular to Svetlana's story. Is that her name, Svetlana or Anna?
Svetlana.
Okay,
Yeah.
because it says Anna on my screen. Or maybe it was a different person. I apologize. So, which actually gets at what I was going to say. There are situations where, in some ways, what you've mentioned in terms of what that power like NVC, I can recognize when I use the practice that this person already was already a giraffe. They were already at a place where they were meeting a need. And so we uncover what is present and also the possibilities of what can happen next. And so, like, in terms of what you were saying, there are situations where I go into a place like that and I'm speaking one language in the beginning, and then to create more peace, more nonviolence, I change the language. The language could be body language. The language could actually go from speaking Russian to English or English to Russian. And then I go from talking about the product to talking about my personal life of vulnerability. I've seen people do that, and I've also done it myself. You talk about the product, and then you show in one language your vulnerability, which is actually the language has power, but then you express it vulnerably with your tone of voice. And that person engages with you both as the entrepreneur, as well as a person who sees you as someone who knows them outside of that, expanding the identity. So we connect with the person on a certain level of humanity, with a needs level and a meeting level and a feeling level. And then we work from different levels of identity and power shifts, as you were talking before, by engaging with them on all levels of identity and all levels of curiosity, using NVC or using even other modalities. And so what you start to witness in situations that I witnessed, a person from Russia, for example, they're at a farmer's market. They meet another person who's actually the vendor who's at the farmer's market. They talk to them because they found that their last name sounds Russian. And all of a sudden, they start talking a little bit in Russian. They have different levels of speaking it. They go back and forth between English. And all of a sudden, start to realize, even as they connect, whether they exchange phone numbers or information like that, that vendor gives them 3 extra oranges. And then the other person comes along who doesn't speak any of that, and they smile. You know, not because they want 3 extra oranges, but because it made them feel good, because they overheard the interaction. And then it starts to spread a little bit, depending on who arrives at the right timing. You know, all those things are very possible. And they can also happen with people who don't even speak Russian. Different gender, different bodies. The gay male can see that. And that may open him up to something else that we're not even aware of, something that's invisible, a power that's invisible that we're not in the room for. But those kind of possibilities exist. And to me, that's what the example you gave was sort of showing. And also, lastly, what I got in my body from what you offered more extensively is the sense of I am no longer in my feelings, I'm in my needs. I'm empowered by my needs, and that's where I'm coming from in terms of trying to share what these things are about what these systems are. Is that we move from feelings and observations until when our needs are met, we feel fully empowered, you know, to be able to share and to express what's going on and what action we might need to take together. But that's my share for now. And it would be wonderful to go into a breakout and talk about that kind of thing and feel the intersectionality in action, finding out what we have in common and how those power shifts happen.
Great. Thank you so much. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to open the rooms up. We've only got 8 minutes left. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes just to say hello. Well, no, that's not enough time. We'll do it next time. I love this idea though, Quentin. The idea of trying to understand how you can relate to the people around you, right? In every system that we're a part of, whether it's, again, the government or, you know, a group of people that we meet with regularly for a book club or the people at the marketplace, in every system we're a part of, we're going to be able to find people that have similar identities as us, but I bet you we'll find overlapping identities with everyone around us. And so the tool is How do we find those connections? It's the kind of idea that Quentin described. It's a similar situation as what we do in NVC. We try to find the needs, and then when we talk from a place of needs, we use that as a bridge to build connection with the others, because everyone can relate at the level of human needs. And so how can we look at the different identities that we carry within us and the identities that the world labels us with, and find ways of relating to everybody around us from that curious, vulnerable place, without a lot of fear of rejection, without a lot of fear of not being accepted. I travel all over the place by myself a lot of the times, almost always by myself, and all over the world. And I feel like I'm at home anywhere I go, because I have the body that I have, which is one advantage, right? It's a privilege to be a white woman, but also it's a lot to do with the way that I carry myself, the warmth, the curiosity, the like, I'm so excited to learn about this person. What's behind this individual that I see in front of me? What are the things that make them them? You know, what are the gifts that they carry with them? I want to know what gifts you have inside of you. And so can we take that inquiry into our relationships, even when there's conflict or dysfunction or disconnection? We have just a few minutes left. There are a few questions at the bottom of the worksheet that kind of get at the inquiry around using these identities and systems of power in a way that can help to empower ourselves and the people around us. So I'd like for you to take those with you. We're going to address them, and we're going to look into that exercise that Quentin suggested for next time. How do we build bridges with the people around us, even if we don't maybe see how we're connected? Is there anything else anyone wants to add before we close?
Thank you for the meeting, for sharing this situation. Very interesting.
Thanks for joining, Svetlana. Thanks for contributing.
Mhm.
I have a question.
Please.
Just now when you talked about like leading with like curiosity and warmth, I love that. And it's something I definitely aspire to. And I was wondering if you have any advice about how to, I guess, ground in a sense of safety enough to be able to do that reliably when the world is very overwhelming. And I notice sometimes that it just pulls my nervous system into a state of protection instead of connection. And that's not how I want to move through the world.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, for me, a lot of it has to do with trust. And I want to take us to a famous quote by Gabor Mate that says that safety is not the absence of threat, but it's the presence of connection. And that's not always connection with the others, but it's about being connected with ourselves. And for me, that's trusting myself. I don't have to trust, and I don't trust other people most of the time, but I trust myself. I trust that I know what I can do. I know how to resource myself. I know how to protect myself. I know that I don't, like if a broken relationship or there's a threat, I can usually defend myself. And then I also trust in not God, but like something outside of me that like karma or something, you know, like this idea of like if I have good intentions and I'm pure at heart and I'm coming from a loving presence with the, you know, really supported by this intention of curious care and love for the others, that something is going to help to protect me. And maybe that's a little bit woo-woo, and it's, you know, grounding in myself. So resourcing myself in the ways that I know how. How do I regulate my nervous system? How do I practice regulating my nervous system? How do I bring those tools into my life regularly to build my tolerance, my window of tolerance by Dan Siegel, right? Literally regulating my nervous system better and better by taking on these practices that are pretty well researched to say that they help us resource ourselves. And I'm happy to share in an email, Molly, some more resources, if that's something that you'd like. I usually,
that would be great.
yeah. Can you can send me a direct message and just add your email, and I'll send you a message directly with a couple of ideas in addition to what I've already shared. I do want to wrap us up because we're over time now. Great. And I wonder, is there anything else that anyone has before we go? I look forward to continuing the conversation at the next session, which will happen the first week of June.
I really appreciate the references at the end, which help me understand things in my own time pace.
Thanks, Pranav. And then lastly, in the chat, there's just kind of a takeaway point that we mentioned here, but bringing it to the writing. I'll also share this Power of Identity TED Talk. It's about 10 minutes long, but it's really good. And it goes into a little bit more detail about how we can resource ourselves in situations where we don't feel very powerful. I really liked this. It was from a woman from Bosnia who moved to Vienna at the start of the war. And she talks about her immigration. Okay, thank you very much. I'll be here for a few more minutes if anybody wants to stick around. Molly, we can talk some more now if you have time.
Actually have to run off to another meeting.
Okay.
But thank you for the space and thank you for the email in advance.
Welcome. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you so much for this space also. And I'm really very happy to be here, and please let it be sustained. Thank you.
Hopefully I'll have the resources to support it.
Please. Thank you so much. And you made mention of sharing a resource from the email. So I sent my email out, so please.
Oh, wonderful. Did you register
Yeah.
for the session?
Yes.
Okay, great.
My email. Have you seen my email?
Yeah, I see it there now.
I just sent IOB 043 Ottawa, right?
I see it there. Yes, I see it. Wonderful.
All right. Thank you so much and have a very wonderful day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for the
Leanne. Thank you. Bye.
session and see you next
Bye for
time.
now.
See you next time, Anna. Nice to see you.
Bye.
Bye.